this. I mean, they have a lot of dreams. They have a lot of ideas. So what would you give him as far as a focus and starting? What would be the focus?
I'm answering from this point of view as just going to Azalea Drive, and I took a lot of counsel. I'm going to a new work. What's my focus? And everybody I talked to said, you need to ensure that you build your biblical credibility and your biblical integrity. And so I would tell a young preacher that's going into ministry, ensure that you focus on your biblical credibility and your biblical integrity. Because if they know you can handle the word of God truthfully, you'll start to build your trust in every other area. So focus on biblical integrity and biblical credibility.
I'm saying the same vein of the word. Everything stems from the word in my mind, and there's a marriage and a merger between the word and the ministry. Paul says, preach the word, make full proof of thy ministry, i.e. preaching the word will give birth to ministry. And no matter how many issues and problems and distractions you might have in the congregation, I think preaching the word in its simplicity and knowing what to preach and when to preach it will help to mitigate, resolve, and eliminate those issues that most young preachers or any preacher might feel compelled to jump on immediately. And I think in metaphors, Ezekiel 37, God says, can these bones live? A fragmented church all over the place. He said, preach. Mm-hmm. So our preaching, then everything came together. God covered it with skin. He didn't do skin. He just did bones. And so if you deal with the bones by preaching, God will cover the church with the skin. Yes. That's what I believe. Yeah. Word, and then ministry will come with word.
I would say with regards to what has been said, the foundation being that word, Paul mentioned something that is very important as well, because he said, I'm preaching, and there are those that are preaching, and they have the wrong motivation. Mm-hmm. So what I would say is, yes, make sure you have a foundation of the word and know exactly that you are telling people the truth. But then it's a possibility that a person can tell the truth with the wrong motivation.
Lord have mercy.
So as a young preacher, I would say make sure that you have the same motivation to preach that Christ had for coming. Surely. He loved people.
Yes.
He gave his life for us. And I think when a young preacher starts his ministry, he needs to be able to get to the point that he can say, I'm doing this because I love people. And I want to see them saved. That's my reason. That's my why.
I was just going to add on to everybody. I think the word has been said. That's vitally important. John 17:17 says, sacred them through thy word. Thy word is truth. And if we are ministers of the gospel, stand on truth. But I also believe, especially for me, it was good to have a mentor. I believe that's good in ministry, someone who you can talk with. And when you're not sure about certain things, they can kind of say, this and that, or the other. Not saying you're going to agree with everything. However, I believe that having someone who you can talk with and someone who can mentor you in a certain direction, I think it would be good a doctor need a doctor, a lawyer need a lawyer, a preacher need another preacher. Mm-hmm. So I think that's very important.
The word is just evident. So I don't even need to repeat that. The word. But from my experience, understanding your ministry, the call of it, understanding your lane. Some ministers have kind of a therapeutic lane. Some ministers have a educational lane, but you got to understand why God called you in this location at this time.
Right.
All of that, was about your call. The preparation, your experiences, what you went through, all of that prepared you for that moment, that ministry. So understanding that, and also the whole, service aspect of it. If you don't love people, if you don't love the work of ministry, the serving, the sacrifice, ministry is going to be arduous. You won't enjoy it for the entirety of your ministry. You will not enjoy it. So if you understand your ministry and are in love with serving God's people, I think the rest of that stuff, sometimes we get with the details of how over time you're going to learn, I preached that. I probably should have done that the first Sunday after this. Or, the timing of, I probably shouldn't have told that. All that's going to come out through the ministry. But understanding those things and being word-centered, I think it's some good advice.
I want to get to ministry. You mentioned something. For Moses to go to Egypt without the burning bush, what would that have been?
Well, can I say this?
And for Paul to go out to the Gentiles, never being on the road to Damascus, what is that?
Murder.
Yeah.
Murder.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
before Moses went without the burning bush, he killed a man.
Yeah.
You went with you
And
went
before Paul,
and before Paul went without Damascus,
that's
he
murder.
sat there and watched them kill some people.
Mhm.
And so when you go before God, you're liable to kill some people. Imagine how many people we know that have gone, that have went but they weren't sent, and have killed a work.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have your mountain experience and your burning bush experience, you're gonna go before God and you're gonna kill somebody.
So then what is calling? Because you kind of touched on it here.
Yeah.
What is calling? And how does because there are some trains of thoughts that say, well, anybody can do what you do. Anybody can get back. I can do a lesson.
Come on.
Brother Daniels, I see you up there praying. I can preach and I can put the scriptures together and make some points.
Yeah.
What's the difference between preaching and being called to preach? How do you know if you're called?
You have to have a heart that is humbled and submissive to the will of God. That was what I saw in both scenarios that you gave about Moses and about Paul. Both were domineering men. Both were men who could have done, but they had to be broken to a place of, wait a minute, I'm God. That's the burning bush for Moses. I can do, but when he gets humbled and, man, take your shoes off. Do you know where you are? And that's when it kind of, oh, wow. This is a God thing. This isn't me, my talent, skills. This is much bigger. Paul, he's running. Matter of fact, I'm on the road to get some folk. The only person, I'm convinced, the only person who could have broken him was Jesus. Paul, what are you doing? And you believe it so wholeheartedly. That's where I kind of see what, Antwan is saying. Sometimes we can come into it so I got something to say. Hey, I can do what he do. Give me a microphone, give me a stage, I can do. But until you are humbled and submissive to the will of God, recognizing that this call was before you were even thought of, before time was thought of. This was ordained long before all of it. And I'm just happening to invite you to be on the team. Wow, that's when it becomes and let me take my shoes off. That's when I shared with the congregation a few weeks ago. We don't have a let me take my shoes off moment even at home. That affects all of our ministry until we're humbled to listen to the will of God.
Can I say that in those two scenarios that you gave, actually biblical accounts that you gave, a commonality between the two was sincerity.
Surely it was.
So we're saying that sincerity alone is not necessarily the call.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. That's good.
He's
I like
sincere, but I mean, Paul was sincere.
Sure.
And Moses was sincere
Mm-hmm.
when he tried to do what he thought God wanted. So furthering the question, if sincerity alone is not, then what has to accompany sincerity in order for it to be that call?
I would say this, and I may not be right about it all the way, but when I'm thinking about those two scenarios, I think a man has to. I believe a man has to be broken in some areas in order for God to use you. What I mean, you talk about Moses who killed the man, Paul persecuted the church. God is the only person who takes imperfect people to perfect people.
Mm-hmm.
He's the only one who does it. I mean, he's the only one who would take somebody like Moses and somebody like Paul and use them. And so I believe a calling has a lot to do with the gift. Meaning that, how do I know it's my gift? I know it's my gift if it edifies and if somebody else affirms it.
True.
So I can't say that's my gift. I can't say I can sing, that's my gift. And nobody ain't edified.
Come on.
And nobody is affirming.
Yeah, you tear the church
Yeah,
up.
yeah, because I want to know, is that your gift?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times, if we're not careful, the calling of ministries on your life when you might have had a bad Sunday, but somebody comes to you and say, "Brother Will, I needed that." You just got it. Just affirmed that even though God is doing something in you that you don't even realize that you helping somebody, and it's not even about because your gift is not for you.
Right.
It's always for somebody
Else. Yeah, you just got it.
You have, yeah.
Yeah.
Look like somebody say something.
Yeah.
Oh man, I've had the experiences that have really caused me to think about calling outside of the pulpit. That is, most preachers see their office, their calling, as an attachment to the pulpit.
Lord have mercy.
All right.
You got to be real careful. Before one can be a preacher, he has to be a man of God.
Yes.
And being a man of God means just that. Being a man that's of God.
Yes.
God is in a man. And so before we even get to the pulpit, one has to have this encounter with God, an epiphany with God. And I think everybody in the Bible that preached prophets, they had an epiphany, a confrontation by God,
All right.
which humbled them to the degree that they felt that they were not even worthy.
Right.
Because if you feel like you're worthy, you probably ain't.
Well, sir.
Right.
God don't call the qualified, he qualifies the called.
Yes, sir.
Nobody
Yes.
ever approached God and said, I'm supposed to preach. God, give me my orders. Most people say, I'm but a child. I can't talk. I can't speak. Why you calling me, God? There are others who can do this better than me. So I think God comes to us, gives us our epiphany, our revelation, and then after that, our sanctification, and then we get our marching orders to do what God has called us to do. And I think that call is kind of realized in an unction that we have in our spirit that really can't be explained.
Sure.
We can't put it in the book and say there's something that's in me, that's pulling me, that won't allow me to rest until I do what God has called me to do. And I don't believe that everybody has that unction. They want to do it because they want to do it.
Yes, right.
Not necessarily because they are driven to do it.
Yeah.
And your dad was talking a little bit earlier. Some are driven and some drift. Some drift in the ministry and then some are driven to ministry. And I think that's the difference.
That's another commonality too. Another commonality is when that broken piece. There is, for those that are successful, that continuous awareness of unworthiness.
Yes.
I'm doing this, and you may be really appreciating it.
But
I don't know. I was watching the sheep.
Right.
And I was but I'm here and I know that this is what I'm. So if you look at to have the sincerity, you have that relationship that you have with the Lord even before the call.
Yeah.
And then when you get the call having been broken, you know that I'm not worthy of the call.
I think that's the frustrating thing in ministry, because you have a group of individuals in ministry, or you have a group of individuals who desire to be ministers. They desire to be preachers. And God is selecting those who are running from it.
Trying not to even be a part of it.
So
I'm not going to be a preacher.
Right, yeah. So then that creates the tension.
Yeah.
Because how did you? I've been fighting to get there
Yes.
for years, and last year you were running the streets, and now you're up. How did you get on that platform
Right.
when I've been fighting to get there? And it's normally those who are truly called to the ministry are not those who set out to conquer it. Right?
Well,
It's those who are running from it.
Well, and the other thing is, and I think I shared this with Trey, a lot of people picked up the call, but it wasn't for them. You know, my phone is on silent, and you see it ring, and you pick it up, and you think that the call, because when you look at the scenario of Paul had some men with him. The other men could not hear the voice of God, but Paul did. Right. And see, a lot of us, we're sitting around and we seeing what Paul listening to, and we thinking, well, if he told Paul, he told me too. No, the call wasn't for you, because you're going to go down to Damascus and mess something up. And a lot of people are answering a call that was never meant for them to pick up.
And let me say this: that there's a difference between charisma and character, because you can have a lot of charisma, but no character. And so I'm thinking about King David. God called him when he was 16. He anointed him at 16, but he didn't appoint him to the age of 30.
Come on.
And I believe God was doing something. With the first time, his ministry didn't start in a castle. It started in the cave of Adullam. The Bible says he was in the cave hiding, and he had followers. 400 in the cave of Adullam. He didn't have a castle ministry.
Right.
He had a cave ministry. And so sometimes people want to get to the castle, but they don't know how to take care of the cave.
And that's a part of that humbling.
Yeah.
That's a part, and I think, I truly believe that humbling, that broken process, helps us forever in our ministry.
To appreciate it.
Right. Paul is always connected to, look at how unworthy, look at how much damage I did, look at how much you wrote nearly half the New Testament, man. But I'm so unworthy. I'm just amazed that God even wanted me. Yeah. And the other thing about it is, we learn through that broken process, we get another dimension of understanding of grace, understanding of forgiveness. How am I gonna teach y'all forgiveness until I've been stabbed 5 times? And I gotta learn to forgive them. I can tell you more than just what this page said. I can tell you this is gonna be hard. How am I gonna understand grace if I've never had to practice it? How can I understand what he's really done for me until he revealed you see who you really are?
It's almost ministry is so funny. It's almost volunteering to go through it, so that you can relate.
Right.
It's almost like you're going to be chosen to suffer, so that you can preach to suffering.
Well, just like our servant. I mean, just like our servant, our master. He chose to suffer to save us. And so now
We have to.
I'm going to volunteer just like he did.
Jose, I need you to marry a prostitute.
Yeah.
So you can understand
That's
Yeah.
not
how
my
much
ministry.
I love you.
That's not my ministry, Lord.
Yeah.
That's not my ministry.
And that brings us back to the fact that when a young minister is trying to determine his direction, he's got to know what was the attraction.
Sure.
Yes.
Am I wanting to preach because I saw this man stand and the audience is at awed at him? Is that my motivation that I might be awed by?
Wow.
Is my motivation that I want to be able to walk and people look at me and say, there he goes.
Mm.
What is the attraction? And if the attraction is less than the thought of, hey, I'm going to have something, yeah, they want to rethink whether or not you got the right call.
They saying do harsh.